I'm McKrae Game. I'm the former president of Hope for Wholeness, which was a national, international ex-gay organization and network of organizations like ours. When I was 19, I came out to my family and lived as a practicing homosexual for 3.5 years. Then got caught up in the evangelical and the ex-gay world for the next 28 years and eventually became one of the most world's renowned ex-gay leaders. I wasn't changing. Nobody I knew or was working with was changing. But in my experience, I have never seen someone go from gay to straight. We've realized that ex-gay ministry, conversion therapy as it's called, doesn't work. It is harmful. It harmed me. It harmed countless people. Repressing our sexuality is really the only thing that people can try to do, because no one's orientation actually changes. Really, the United States pioneered and perfected ex-gay ministry, and one thing we realized is it doesn't work. It's a waste of time. It is harmful for other countries to try something that we tried and it failed. And I would strongly encourage you to not go down the road that has harmed so many people's lives, including mine, and countless young people and older people who have repressed their identity and tried to change something that really can't and shouldn't be tried to be changed. I'm McKrae Game. I'm the former president of Hope for Wholeness, which was a national, international organization to help people come out of homosexuality. Our slogan was freedom from homosexuality through Jesus Christ. In 20 years of ex-gay ministry, I learned one thing, that there is not freedom from homosexuality. There is acceptance of homosexuality and acceptance of ourselves. The United States pioneered and tried to perfect ex-gay ministry, and it didn't work. And I would strongly urge any countries, pastors, or anyone to not go down the road that we tried and repeatedly failed at. I'm McKrae Game. I'm the former president of Hope for Wholeness, which was a national, international organization, ex-gay organization to help people come out of and find freedom from homosexuality. One of the things we learned really early on is people don't find freedom from homosexuality to become straight, but really to repress their sexuality and who they really are as people. We tried this repeatedly to make people be something different than they are, and one thing I realized is we're harming people. I would strongly encourage people to not use this method on anyone, to create an organization or method to try to change people who are gay. We should accept them for who they are. And one of the best ways you can be a good parent is to love and accept your children just as they are. Reparative therapy, or conversion therapy as it is also labeled, is something that is harmful. It's a false promise. It is something that was created primarily by ever straight therapists trying to invoke their ideology and theology on LGBTQ individuals, trying to make them heteronormative. I was told that my attractions would shift, that they would diminish, that they would lessen. And in 28 years of me going through that process of conversion therapy and becoming a leader, my attractions actually intensified. They never lessened or diminished at all. I came out when I was 19 and lived as a practicing gay young man from 19 to 22, but then got saved through an Amway conference. And one day I was driving in my car and heard a radio spot by a ex-gay organization in the area. And it said, if you're gay or lesbian and don't want to be, there's hope for change. We're having a conference for anyone interested in the area. And it piqued my interest because, you know, my family had never accepted me as gay, and, you know, this was 30 years ago. My culture certainly wasn't accepting anybody as gay, especially in the Bible Belt of the South that I was living in. From that boy that was 5 years old putting his sister's ballerina outfit on, because I knew there was something different about me. Wanted to be normal like anyone else, and heard this radio spot and wanted to see what it was about, and went. I saw Mike Conrad's book, You Don't Have to Be Gay, and picked it up, of him and Mike Haley and these letters going back and forth with each other, and started going to see the therapist that was holding the conference. You know, I would go once a week, you know, off and on for the next 8 years. In that time, started dating women. Not that I was attracted to women, but, you know, the idea of having a family with someone of another man was just unthinkable at the time. And because I wanted a family, I wanted kids, and so, you know, the idea of finding a wife, and so I started dating girls. I had dated girls in high school, but would, you know, typically think of guys while being with them to try to perform. And this was certainly no different, but now I was being a good Christian, so I was trying to not, you know, act out sexually at all. Though I failed several times, but it was always with guys. Got married during that time, and had a one-time fall with a guy through a time of infertility that we were losing our minds. I wasn't thinking about women, but I was limiting my access to any kind of gay porn or anything. The internet wasn't around yet. We didn't have smartphones, and there wasn't really a gay culture around here to tempt me. To my first Exodus conference, it was a regional in Virginia, and then I went to my first national in Seattle, Washington with my wife, and just very quickly became a part of leadership in the ex-gay world. I had not seen any. I had not been you know, around any gay porn in a number of years, but I was down the street buying a Snickers bar or something at this gas station that was, you know, a half mile away from my house that I had never been in. And I'm paying for my candy bar, and I look over to the left, and there's this whole rack of magazines, and I saw guys on the magazines from where I was, and I walked over to them, and it was gay porn. I had not seen it in years, and bought a magazine, brought it home, used it, and burned it, and I got in this repetitive pattern of buying and burning. And I eventually, because I was so grieved at what I was doing and this bad, you know, Christian witness I was being to these people, that I wrote them a letter. They were Muslims, and they closed their stores on Sundays. And so I wrote them a letter and told them, or apologized to them for my poor Christian witness, and told them that I would never be in their store again. And I put a picture of my wife and I in the letter to basically make those store clerks accountability partners with me to try to stop that action. And for years, I battled with driving past that store and having flashbacks, because I was trying to repress something that was so innate to who I am, and I'm trying to go in a completely different direction. that was a hard time in my life. Evangelicalism and ex-gay organizations are very much like a cult. You don't realize you're in a cult. You know, you just become very, very convinced of what you're doing. It has its own unique language and this own methodology that you completely buy into. Even though my attractions weren't changing and shifting, I was so convinced of their position against homosexuality and their heteronormative singular way of thinking that I really couldn't see straight around to think of another plausible way to be. No, I never believed or called myself heterosexual. I thought that was ridiculous. I've never had a sexual attraction to a woman in my entire life. My attractions had never changed, and of all the hundreds of people that I had tried to help and had been around, their attractions had not changed. And the people who had said that they were delivered, when I would ask them more questions, it would always kind of fall apart and break down, and it would really come down to that they were really just repressing their attractions, that they really had not actually reoriented. You know, the Christian world always talks about having peace and joy, and that you can't have peace or any joy if you're living in sin. You know, that's their language. But I will say that in my 28 years of trying to repress my sexuality and go in a completely opposite direction of what is really more innate of who I am, I was in a constant state of anxiety. I had 4 nervous breakdowns while I was in ex-gay ministry, trying to be something different than I was and trying to help other people do the same thing. It really created a form of mental illness in my life. And I have to say, since I have put aside that struggle of trying to live for everyone else and trying to deny my sexuality and who I am, and really just saying I don't care who and what other people think, I have more peace now than I have ever had in my entire life. You know, I'm still married. I've been married now for 24 years. Our relationship is very much like it was for most of our marriage. We're more like siblings, really good siblings, than we were an intimate husband and wife. My ministry newsletter was more of a form of propaganda than it was anything, using my marriage as a propaganda tool, trying to say how in love I was and trying to use my family as this propaganda tool. In ex-gay ministry, you're almost trained to not be honest with yourself and to really deny those things. You couldn't even say the word gay about yourself. You have to say same-sex attraction, and I do love my wife and my kids that I have, but I do often wonder what my life would have been like if my parents would have accepted my sexuality, if I had accepted my sexuality. I wonder what kind of marriage my wife would have had if she wouldn't have married me, what kind of relationships in life I would have had if I had not been led down the road that I went down. Oh, I had some train wrecks of counseling appointments with men, and their wives were brutal. I had some, I remember one time a wife was so brutal about her husband having gay attractions. Of course, we called them same-sex attractions back then. She actually went out and had an affair with another man just to get even with her husband because he had same-sex attractions. And I mean, just the vitriol that I heard from women. But frankly, I don't blame these women, because these men lived secret lives where, you know, they were doing all these different things, and their wives knew nothing, and they were just repeatedly lying to them. So the men basically created this scenario that they're in, and their wives were just responding to it. So most of them ended in divorce. Most of these marriages ended in very bad divorces. I'm ashamed to say I encouraged men to follow my footsteps over and over again, participated in a marriage, and to see these men in these types of marriages that I was in. And it's really not fair to anyone. I really have a lot of regrets, especially early on in my ministry years, before I started really questioning some of the logic of the things that I had bought into, that I was just regurgitating. And I really do have a great deal of regret, and I do apologize. Those things I said weren't true, but I was just trying to cover up the pain. But it took me a while, 18 months of processing what I had been through for 20 years. And I really do have a lot of regrets for people, especially you, that I worked with and said a lot of things, and some condemnation towards you, especially younger people who were trying to explore who they were. And in many ways, I was envious of you because I was stuck in a role, and you weren't stuck in a role. And I hope that you will live your life to the fullest that I'm trying to do now. Over the years, I counseled a lot of people, a lot of men, young and old, a lot of family members, a lot of wives. I have a lot of regrets for the things that I said in all those years, especially early on where I was more of a zealot. You might have been a young person excited about coming out, and your parents sent you to me to try to talk you out of being gay, and I might have been kind of ugly to you. And I really do apologize. Ask for your forgiveness even, and don't necessarily expect you to give it. Ex-gay ministry doesn't work. Really, the best thing we can do is to love and accept ourselves. It took me a very long time to do that. The best thing we can do as a family member is to love and accept our family members just as they are, with no expectations on them of trying to change them. Homosexuality is not a problem. It's not something that needs to be fixed. Scripture tells us to love one another as we love ourselves. You cannot love anyone if you hate yourself. I had gone on to Grindr and set up an account just to talk to guys. And for the next year was just talking to guys. It wasn't anything sexual, didn't have any inappropriate conversations, because I was still afraid of being outed. I was still this guy, and I was always, for 20 years in ex-gay ministry, I was always afraid of being outed on the Rachel Maddow show or whatever show, or by Wayne, or whoever was going to out me. I wasn't going to be the next John Polk. That was my decision. I was firm in. As my friends in Ski Patrol, my winter job, they said, McKrae, you're not happy. We love you. We want you to love yourself. We want you to accept yourself. You're not happy. And they said, we're going to love and accept you whether you love and accept yourself or not. But we really want you to be happy. I mean, I had never experienced love like this before. All of the relationships I had had for the last 28 years were all conditional based on my performance. I mean, that's really what the evangelical and ex-gay ministry world does. I went out with a couple of my Ski Patrol friends and had my first gay relationship in over 20 years. And it was for a couple of weeks that my wife knew nothing about it, and she found out. My sister had actually told her because of a conversation she and I had had. And she called me up and said, are you fooling around on me? And I said, yeah, I am. I've been with a few guys over the last few weeks. I knew I couldn't stay where I was. And I was in a great deal of inner turmoil and conflict and pain. And I met with gay community leaders because I was trying to buy some time, because I really wanted to wait. My son was already in college, and he was fine. He was living away from the home, but my daughter was still in school. We raised both of our kids in Christian education, and I didn't want to traumatize her in her last year, her senior year of high school. And so I met with gay community leaders and told them everything, and said, I really need some time. I'm terrified. I'm scared of being outed, but I'm scared of, what's my life going to look like? How do I do this? I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. They were really very kind and sweet, and they promised to try to help me to keep the story down until my daughter graduated. I told my wife that we would have a talk, and I'd have my decision after my daughter graduated, and we did. But it was 1 year ago, June 9th, which is in a couple of days, that I was sitting in that chair, scrolling through Facebook, and I came on Michael Bussey's post from 11 years earlier, where he was talking about him and his late partner being out one night and being attacked, and both viciously stabbed, and his partner being killed. I was so traumatized by this, and I had already been kind of changing the dialogue on Facebook, trying to kind of prepare people for me coming out, and because I had been silent personally, and I was very open and transparent to the most I knew of and accepted myself to be at the time, over 20 years, and for 18 months I was silent personally. But then I started changing my dialogue, and someone had asked me, McKrae, are you now pro-gay? And so I have this McKrae, are you pro-gay floating over my head for a little while, and then I see this post about Michael and his partner being killed, and I'd probably read it years earlier. But today, that day, it really struck a chord, and I hit share, and I wrote above it, McKrae, are you now pro-gay? And I said, I don't know if I'm pro-gay. I know I'm not anti-gay. I am gay. And then I had a few people respond and say, you just came out on Facebook. And I'm like, no, that's not what I did. I didn't mean, that's not what I meant. And they're like, no, you came out. And I'm like, I believe anybody and everybody deserves to be able to live their life as who they are without being attacked for who they are. I feel like I owe people to be just as strong in the position of gay affirming as I was in anti. That I need to go just as strong in 180 degrees if I'm actually going to mean what I say when I say I'm sorry. The reaction I got was all over the place. I got a visceral response from every direction, especially the gay community. I mean, because they take this so personally. Conversion therapy is seen as so harmful and so damaging, and people who don't know anything about me assume the absolute worst. And so I've got family members, I've got friends, I've got followers. I had a lot of people that knew me, and I was now renouncing. I was going from being the ex-gay poster boy to renouncing my work had people in the gay community say, you are never going to be a part of the gay community. We will never accept you. The evangelical Christians, there was no talking to them. I wasn't on their side anymore. 99% of my social network, I lost those people. And so I was alone for a long time. So much of the ex-gay world is not authentic. They've just totally drank the Kool-Aid of the evangelical world, and they use these words like delivered and I've changed, and when we're really not being honest. Because one of the things I learned really not too long into my ex-gay stint of 20 years was, we in the ex-gay world use words like freedom, hope, change, delivered, and they mean something completely different to general society when it comes to the subject of change from homosexuality, delivered from homosexuality. The world and the Christian world, they believe that to mean reorienting. That doesn't mean having attractions to just your wife, because I had relational attractions to my wife, but I wasn't checking out women. I was still gay. So much of the ex-gay world is just not honest with themselves because they so want to please their pastors and their friends, and they're doing such a disservice to the people that they serve, and especially to themselves. I was doing a disservice to myself. I remember going to my first Exodus Regional Conference and as a leader, and sitting in this leadership confessional, and there was this guy bawling his eyes out confessing masturbation, and I'm like, what is wrong with this person? I mean, it was just so strange to me. There's something so normal that this person sees as so bad, but that's what ex-gay ministry does, and the evangelical world does to something that is so normal. It's so much of creating mental illness in your life when you're trying to repress something that is so innate to who you are. It was so much easier for me to resist before the internet, before a smartphone, before you could Google hot guys on your phone. But now we've got, Tumblr and Facebook and, Instagram and Grindr and Bumble and all these different things. I used to have guys that would come in and confess to hooking up in parks and bathrooms, and now it's just so easy. You just turn your Grindr account on, or Bumble or whatever, and you swipe left or swipe right or answer a message, and it was so hard for me to have a smartphone. I had to have it locked down in every possible way. I had to have filters on my phone because I was trying to keep me from doing something and being something and looking at something or someone that my heart was crying out for, that you're crying out for. And it just makes it worse and worse and worse. Unless you're going to become the Unabomber and get, a shed in the woods, without any cell phone or internet service. But you know what? You're not going to be able to avoid it because it's inside of us. It's inside our heart. It's inside our mind. And I have more peace now that I don't have all those filters and restrictions and just accept the fact that I'm gay. I don't have that anxiety and that tension that I always had. I really don't feel like ex-gay ministry or all of that direction reflects the life of Jesus. It really more reflects the life of the Pharisees. And if you are going to love and worship Jesus, I think we have to learn to love and accept others, which starts with ourselves. If you have anger in your heart towards other people, including me, for accepting my sexuality and encouraging people to love and accept themselves, you're not reflecting the love of Christ. And I am going to really challenge you on that, because it is Jesus that we set out to worship, not Paul, not anyone else, but the life of Jesus. And I would strongly encourage you to go back to the roots of, am I, when we say Christian, am I Christ-like? To those of you who are part of the Freedom March, I want to ask you a question. Are you being honest with yourself? One of the things I see as a fault in your message is a lack of honesty and transparency. When you say you've changed, when you say you've been delivered and set free, people see that and they hear that as you have gone from gay to straight. They do not hear that you have learned to master your thoughts, that you have learned to deny your thoughts. That's not what they hear. And at the very essence, denying all of your thoughts and disciplining every thought, you're creating a scenario of mental illness in people. To those that are going to the Freedom March, especially those that are participating and walking in the Freedom March, that say that they've been set free, they've been delivered, they've been changed, one of the things I'm going to really encourage you to do is something that I was, as much as I possibly could be, is be honest. Be honest with yourself, be honest with other people, because when you use words like changed, delivered, set free, people have a belief about those words, and you're not projecting in an honest way about what society means. They believe that people can change their orientation, but you know better. You know that you have trained yourself, that you've, captured your thoughts, that you've stopped those thoughts. You haven't actually reoriented your thoughts from gay to straight. And you're not doing yourself or anyone any favors. You're actually doing yourself and society a huge injustice by being inauthentic. I was fired and escorted out of Hope for Wholeness on, I think it was November 7th, around that date of 2017. But in September and October, just those months before, I had written 2 articles in the Hope for Wholeness newsletter. You can probably still find them on the Hope for Wholeness website, where I talked about my struggle with pornography. I was extremely open. And I got board permission. I gave them to the board in advance to edit and I told them I would not publish them without unanimous approval because they were very controversial. And they gave me a very minimal edit, and they gave me a unanimous approval. And very shortly after the second month was approved, one by one, they recanted their approval of those being published. They said they should never have been published. And I'm like, that's not fair. They had, before that summer at our conference board meeting, they ordered me into counseling. They told me what counselor I was going to go to. And they were going to pay for it, and I went to the counselor, nice enough guy. I held nothing back. I told him absolutely everything. I talked nonstop for an hour and did the next thing the next week. But very shortly after the very first hour, he said, McKrae, one of the things I can tell you is you don't need counseling. And number 2, you are not an addict. And number 3, your board should not be making you go to counseling or anything, and I will not see you again against your will. I will only see you because you want to be here. I really have nothing to share with you because you don't need counseling, but I will help you process the stress because you're under a great deal of stress. And I was under a tremendous amount of stress. I had been under a tremendous amount of stress for 28 years of trying to repress who I was and doubly, triply, quadruply trying to help other people repress their life. And so I told my board this, and they accused me of lying, and they did not believe anything I said that he had told me, and they weren't checking on me. They actually tried to trap me in a lie because they, of course, knew I had lied because I had admitted to a fall to one of them, and one of them had told the other one. And so one of them asked me, who was a little more stringent in our relationship, had asked me how I was doing, knowing the already answer, and my secretary apparently had been taking screenshots of my history and sending it to my board. So they already knew the answers to the questions, and I wasn't being completely honest. I was just obfuscating the answer. Because I don't like to lie, but I try to just go around answering it so I don't have to lie. And you know, they made me go to counseling. Counseling was helpful because it was a stress reliever. But my counselor said, you know, it's completely ridiculous for your board to think that you're going to give up porn because it's your way to release stress because you have all this stress in your life, and that's your only, because, you know, I didn't drink because I was this ministry leader. I was trying to live this role, so I didn't drink alcohol. I wasn't on any medications, you know. I didn't really have any hobbies. I just worked all the time. I was this ex-gay, you know, propagandist. Alan and Randy were trying to read the times. They were trying to be sensitive to the times. Alan had a nephew that was gay. He and Randy were very sensitive people. They were trying to change the direction, the very hardcore direction of Exodus, and trying to bring it back. I think the Christian, the gay Christian network had a profound effect on Alan and on Exodus, actually. When Alan went on to their conference, and there was a panel, and that was put on YouTube, that really created a mutiny of sorts. We had a leadership conference where we all met, and we discussed, you know, what we were going to do with Exodus. We went in round tables, and they had all these different scenarios. One was to close Exodus. One was to morph it, to change it, to split away the network so Exodus could do its own thing separately. There were a number of things. From this started people concerned for Exodus that I was a part of, that became Restored Hope Network. I was a part of that secret group for 2 weeks, and it was extremely negative. It was all about trying to tear, you know, Exodus down and get Alan fired, and to or get him to quit, and all their plans. And I was like, I can't be a part of this. This is just pure negativity. And that became Restored Hope Network, and Restored Hope Network started, and it just kept lobbing attacks at Exodus just non-stop. They came out with letters nationally published in newspapers, and they were intent on destroying the financing of Exodus, and they did that. In Allen's book, which most people wouldn't read because they were so mad at Allen and the fact that he allowed Exodus to go down the road that he did, and that he closed it. It was going to close whether Allen would have closed it or not, because the funding had dried up. It says that in his book, that I was one of the few people, a part of the movement, that actually read the book. His financial secretary comes in his office and says, Exodus is not going to survive the summer. You need to start making layoffs today. So, he contacted me 3 weeks before he made it public that he was planning on closing Exodus. I believe because he knew I would start something else that would be an alternative to Restored Hope, because he and I were closely connected. He knew how I was versus how Restored Hope had been acting, very right-wing, and I was very, as he had said one time in an interview, that Hope for Wholeness was the good of Exodus. And I always tried to be that. I think one of the reasons why I was fired was because I was taking Hope for Wholeness in the direction that I had hoped Exodus had continued to go instead of closing, was to become more gay affirming, more gay accepting.
Who was part of this driving the Restored Hope Network? And Paul, talk about who was involved in that role.
The founders of Restored Hope were, of course, Ann Paulk, Andy Kaminsky, Jason Thompson, Stephen Black, Robert Gagnon. Those were the core leaders, the ones that created the website and the position papers. Robert Gagnon and Andy Kaminsky wrote most everything as far as position papers on Restored Hope. Very, very right-wing positions on those subjects. Stephen Black was a strong, still a very strong proponent for conversion therapy, reparative therapy. And they all publicly denounced me, trashed me. Ann Paulk went on Facebook talking about me sleeping around with men. That's an exact quote from her post on Facebook. They all publicly denounced me, trashed me. Stephen did more than one very ugly video and one podcast about me, speaking very ugly about me. These are not loving, wonderful, sweet people that are representing the love of Jesus. These are people that are really trying to control and manipulate people to deny their sexuality and who they are. It's really almost a terrorist group of sorts to the gay community. I would say they are the worst of the worst of what is left